Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ralph Bakshi Retrospective right here, Tyro.com. I'm joined once again, as always, with my good buddy, the young boy, the Catface Killer. Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Oh God, not that voice again.
Well, stop calling me that then.
Yeah, that sound like a robot? You sound like a mind-controlled robotic slave or something.
Oh yeah, my personality has been encoded and placed in some kind of a robot head.
Yeah, fuck you. Don't worry about it, guys. You might understand what the young one is alluding to at some other time. Anyway, we completely digress. Guys, if you've been following us on the Ralph Bakshi Retrospective, you know I've been doing all of his movies. If you were here last time, we actually spoke about the Wizards. I can't say it I can't roll my tongue and say it. Wizard Wars. It was actually meant to be called Wizard Wars, but that goddamn Star Wars junkie, George Lucas, just had to put his nose where it didn't belong. And then we got Wizards. Guys, if you're on YouTube, I'll put a link in the top right-hand corner. But now we're going to move on to the retrospective to, you know what? A very, very famous, very popular movie that a lot of people, to be honest, for good reason, might not even know that Ralph Bakshi had anything to do with this movie. And we are actually speaking about the first cinematic movie of, is it R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings? Is that the name of the author?
Oh, J.R.R. Tolkien? Yeah.
Okay. So, I was going to say Game of Thrones guy.
George R.R. Martin?
Yeah, you see the R.R. They got me confused. I was like, which one's which? So, Ralph actually did this adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. This was made in 1978. This is a rotosculpt, again, animated live action hybrid movie. And unlike Bakshi's other works, well, more like Fritz the Cat, this is already an established franchise that he's creating to the screen, bringing to the screen, bringing this animated flair to it. And I think we've always, maybe I speak for myself, I've always criticized Bakshi on the storytelling. But when he's working with an established script or some kind of written works already, I feel like he has a better chance to shine because I love his artistic flair. And with this movie, I am in that direction. I feel like it was a better use of his talents, lending his animation skills to this written narrative. And this was my first time seeing this movie. I know this is very old. I know a lot of the fan community, the nerds community, knew about this movie way before the Peter Jackson trilogy in the 2000s. Like, this was the first Lord of the Rings. And for what it is, I'll get it right off the bat. I thought it was pretty good, even though it's incomplete. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, we're coming in to a film that's in like the middle of a long story. So in that terms, like, I'm pretty forgiving because, obviously we didn't watch like The Hobbit or anything, although I guess we'll be talking about that tied in. But I do agree, like, out of everything I've watched so far, it's the best.
Another baby step forward, yeah?
Yeah, it's like a baby step forward in most regards. I really did like the animation. I miss this kind of like fluid hand-drawn stuff. Like a lot of the stuff we watch nowadays, even though it looks prettier, it's choppy. You know what I mean? Because all they do is they save time to make the pictures look prettier. So when I'm watching this, I'm seeing them move and everything. It strangely enough looks like more fluid and more realistic movement than when you watch like newer stuff, especially like anime is really bad about that.
100% agree.
100%, yeah. So I really did appreciate that. The rotoscope, it looks like he's still kind of experimenting with it. Comparing it to the Peter Jackson films, which are great. I'm not going to knock them or anything. But like when I'm looking at those guys and then I'm looking at the rotoscoped orcs in this film, it's actually kind of scary because they're like so murky looking and everything. And instead of being CG or like a lot of computer enhancement on a what is it called, the mocaps?
Yeah, motion capture. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, it actually looks like living orcs, even though it's hard to get good details on them on their faces, especially a lot of the times. It still looked good, although there's some times where, like I said, it looks like experimental. Like there's a part where one of them gets kicked off a ledge and it just looks like the guy's laying down flailing his arms.
Yeah, that happens a lot. To be honest with you, a lot of the action, you know what I want to do, let's because I think the listeners need to get a better basis of where we're coming from with our experience with the actual franchise, because again, Lord of the Rings is a massive fantasy franchise. to this day. I mean, I sent you a link. They're just talking about making the Lord of the Rings into another TV series that Amazon are trying to buy. This is 2017.
Like, I would understand if kids that were born, like, even in the 90s, but like 2000 and later, they have no idea what we're talking about. Because, like, what I'm thinking of when I'm looking at this film is The Hobbit and the 3 following books.
Yeah.
But what they've done is, especially like with Peter Jackson, which is what everybody knows now, is they added a whole bunch of new stuff. Yeah. And this is now considered canon. So there's like a much more condensed story. That's what I'm familiar with. I think that's what you're familiar with, and what people our age and older are familiar with.
Yeah.
And then there's the movies, which is a whole expanded thing. That's what other people know, and I don't know that. Like, not really.
Well, let's be a little bit more specific. So first of all, let me just get this right off the bat. I'm not the biggest fan of this whole franchise. The Lord of the Rings franchise, to be honest with you, to me, it's just another fantasy franchise, like another superhero. I'm more into sci-fi and superhero kind of stuff and just action stuff. So this, to me, the fantasy stuff, the role-playing stuff, the tabletop stuff.
That's always been more my thing.
Oh, cool. Well, that's interesting. So speaking about Lord of the Rings specifically, personally, I was first introduced to this franchise through the Peter Jackson movies. I didn't know about the franchise any before that. Those movies, I found, as they went on, I found them progressively worse. Like, I really liked the first movie. I didn't really like the second one. And by the third one, I just didn't care anymore. The visuals were nice and the story overall was good. But I detached more and more from the characters as the series went on. I cared less and less about, because they started to focus, because as the movie's books goes on, well, not the books, I haven't read them, but as the movies goes on, I just felt like they strayed more away from Frodo anyway, and just focused more on the other world building and the battles and all, and I didn't care for anybody. I just wanted basically to see where the ring's going and see if Frodo will give it back and what would happen to Gollum. So those 3 movies, I thought, they're fine, but Nuance, I can tell you this much, she is a super fangirl of this franchise. And when that was done, the trilogy was done, and I heard they were going to do the prequel. Now, I read the book to The Hobbit after Lord of the Rings, then I read the audiobook, or this is the audiobook, whatever. I thought, hey, this is really cool. So when they released these more recently, this prequel trilogy, which is what you're talking about, where they extended a very short book into 3 long-ass movies.
Correct.
I didn't even get past the first one.
Really?
I read the book, and I thought the book was a nice, short, fun ride.
Oh yeah, I love The Hobbit. That's one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Lord of the Rings, it's a neat story, but like you said, like, as they diverge away from the ring with their storytelling and do like sort of an ensemble dovetail, it's like you. I was really more focused on the ring. Like, that was the beginning of the journey, and I want to see that journey, not everything else.
I mean, that's all I got to say about the movie trilogies, the Peter Jackson stuff. I just find them whatever. They're fine. I don't hate them. I don't think they're... I know generally people do not like the Hobbit trilogy. They think it's bloated. They think it's just, like you just said, made up fluff. I never got through them, so I just didn't care. Personally, for me, reading the Hobbit book was enough. Reading the Hobbit book, watching the 3 movies of the Lord of the Rings, that was enough. I don't feel the need to go and watch the Hobbit trilogy anymore. So I found it very interesting about this movie. But before we get back to it, I want to know about your experience with the trilogy and books and whatnot.
It's a little bit more spotty and scattered than yours. As I've stated, I've read The Hobbit and the original Lord of the Rings trilogy. I did see the movies, the original release of the Lord of the Rings movies. I don't really remember them that well, to be honest, but I think they actually followed the books pretty much dead on. And then I think comparing it to literature with J.R.R. Tolkien's writing style versus seeing it cinematically, I actually think the movies were better. But again, like I said, it has the same problem, which is not the fault of Peter Jackson or the movie time. They adapted the books pretty much how they were. It's that, they strayed away from the Ring storyline, which is what you and I cared about. Yeah. Seeing the fights and everything instead of just reading about it, because J.R.R. Tolkien's writing style is very simplistic. He does like really good with making poetry and songs, but then when it comes to saying like, this is how everything happened, it's pretty much just like I said, he's very straightforward with his narrative and sentencing structures. Like, they walked to this place, this is what it was like, this is what they saw. It's like very I don't want to say it's like boring, but
You make it sound babyish. That's simplified.
I do make it sound babyish, especially compared to a lot of stuff that's out there nowadays.
Sure.
It's very simple,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a lot of it is up to the reader to expand it with their imagination versus like when you're seeing the movies, they take care of all that blank canvas for you. I did not see the Hobbit adaptation of the film because I heard it was going to be expanded like we were talking about, and I just like, if they had adapted it like how they did the Lord of the Rings, probably would have watched the movie, probably would have loved it. I would have loved seeing a story I loved adapted to the screen like completely and truthfully how
Without
it was
being
created.
stretched out and padded out, you mean?
I mean, like if they had done 2 movies, I've been like, okay, I guess I could see that. But like when you're doing 3 because you want to add more stuff and like this whole other storyline and all these other characters, you want to take characters from another future thing and throw them back in the past. It's like, no, this is part of the reason why I have trouble with some things. Like I'm not trying to be mean, but like I have trouble with like Star Wars or with like American comics because they do that stuff and they do it way too much.
Sure.
So it's just like when I want to experience a story, I do want mental stimulation and everything, but I don't want to be like undoing stuff that I learned and experienced because they want to like retcon things. You know what I mean? Like that's too much work for enjoyment. I'm supposed to be kicking back, using my imagination, and enjoying a story. And like when I watched this cartoon, I could because all they did was adapt the thing straight away, and it was good. I also want to point out like the voice acting in this cartoon. Probably the best I think so far.
Yeah.
In terms of matching voices to characters as well as their mannerisms, whether moving around or what they're doing. Like when they're shouting on the screen, the voice actor is fucking shouting, for example, and that's like it sounds sad, but that's a big step forward for Ralph Bakshi.
Well, here's the thing, man. We need to focus on the rotoscoping. So getting back to the Bakshi movie now, man, I actually love the rotoscoping style. Now, again, it's not very popular. Even to this day, people don't like it. I actually spoke about that movie, Loving Vincent, that Vincent van Gogh movie, which that was a style of rotoscoping because they were painting over live acted scenes. And again, that's what this movie is. If you go on YouTube and look at behind the scenes of this movie, Ralph Bakshi acted out a lot of these scenes. But obviously, because he used animation over it, they didn't have to use real weapons. They didn't have to use real landscapes. They could all do that in post of animation. But as you said in the beginning, because they're real people making these facial expressions and moving, the fluidity in this movie is so beautiful. It's so natural. It's like, wow, man, this is such a masterful blend of real life and animation. It's his own style. And a bit of a spoiler, but actually carries this technique on through most of his following movies as well, because he's like, I got something here. And I think he was right to do that because this really brought a more of an immersion to the characters. And even though this was made in the late 70s and then the acting's kind of choppy and it's kind of hammy, because they're really moving, and as you said, when they're shouting, they're really shouting. It's just that they're animated over. It brings such a much more level of realism to it. Here's a great example. One of the best really freaky scenes that I know people say is over the top is when Frodo and the hobbits are traveling with the ring and this one rider kind of senses them, gets off his horse, and is kind of walking around and
he's like sniffing around like all creepily and stuff, and they're like huddling under a ledge. It looks really creepy because it's a dude walking around and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, man, even if Walt Disney was to animate that, I'm talking Walt Disney in terms of how much money they got, how much budget they got to make it look good. The fluidity, you just couldn't do it in the late 70s. You just couldn't. And to be honest with you, to this day, it wouldn't just look as real as it does here. And again, this technique is so, honestly, I'm a big fan of this technique, especially when we talk about the other Bakshi movies. I'm like, this is a whole style of its own. I wish there was another director who really this was his thing and he made rotoscope movies because it's such a great blend of animation and whatever. Anyway, let's get back to the story of this movie here. So what I will say, if I never saw Lord of the Rings and I watched this movie, I would think it was pretty cool because one of the things this movie did really well, I haven't seen the Peter Jackson first movie in a long time, but the movie does a really good job of just bringing you in because it explains how, what's his name? What's Gollum's real name? Is it Smeagol? Smeagol, yeah. How he got the ring, how he lost the ring. It's a nice short little behind the scenes of the Hobbit. I know it's not the Hobbit story, but they kind of quickly run you through it. And then they get you to the first Lord of the Rings story. And that I thought that was well done, because when I watched the Lord of the Rings movie, I remember just them not being holding your hand through as much. And I just think the way this was to me, this was made as a more of a children's movie. It's a lot more edgy, it's a lot more violent, but by 70s standards, this is what children's movies were. And I think it did a good job of just executing the tone for the most part, because I got a criticism later. But just from the first 30 minutes, I was like, I like the way this started. I think he executed the narrative very well. And I was into it, man. For the first half of it, I was really into it.
I enjoyed it the whole way through. I even ended up having to stop halfway through it, like literally around an hour mark, a little bit after that, and then pick it up earlier today to finish it. And I think I enjoyed it the whole way through, really.
My problem was that it got a bit rushed, because looking behind the scenes of this, Bakshi intended for this to be a part 1 and a part 2. Now, what he said was, and here's the funny thing I want your opinion on. Now, when he was making the movie, he intentionally knew that this was a long-ass book. I'm not trying to cram everything into one. It's going to be 2 parts. So a lot of people are like, oh, Bakshi, why didn't you call this part 1 then? And he's like, I tried to, but the studio said no. If people see part 1, they're not going to want to buy tickets. They're going to wait for the second one to come out, and we're going to immediately lose. So what happened was, and people know this in real life, what happens was people went to see the movie, they really enjoyed it, and then it didn't finish. The story didn't finish, and people been shitting on Bakshi to this day that, what? You called it the Lord of the Rings and it's not even all of it? I mean, how could you? And Bakshi's like, it's not my fucking fault. I told you guys not to call it just Lord of the Rings. Call
this
it
guy
part 1.
has like such bad luck. He really does.
Yeah, and you know, but to be fair, he's come out and said that he knew he was going to get shit on for this, and he's with the fans hating on the movie because it's a 2-part movie without the second part. And to make matters worse, you know, he never got to do the second part because the studio was like, you know, it didn't work out. It didn't sell as much as they want. But the movie has become its own legend because it's very adequate. It's very faithful. Bakshi said he always wanted to make this faithful. It's not like his other crazy street urban movies. And it's not as cartoony. He actually went with a more, even though it's rotoscopes, you would think it is more human-like looking anyway. He said he could have made it more cartoony, like he did in that Coonskin, which was...
Oh, I'm glad he did not. I actually really liked both the animated portions and the rotoscope portion. I think he blended them very well together.
Yeah, so I don't blame him for the part 1, part 2 thing. It's a shame because, like you said, he's got bad luck. He's got shit for it. And I will say, I think I would have liked to seen this completed, which is a shame.
I wish he had done that with his crowdfunding instead of that, whatever the fuck that thing was, that 20-minute thing. But I mean, like, honestly, comparing it to the Fellowship of the Ring and then like a little bit of the Two Towers, because it kind of climbs into there.
Exactly.
It is very faithful, like you said. Like, from my memory, the only thing that's a little different is like some of the side characters are a little bit more minimalized on their interactions and their dialogue, and it's just compacted because they wanted to do 2 films instead of like 3, for example. So I do understand that like completely. I enjoyed this a lot. I really did. The songs, like I said, the voice acting was good enough for them for when they had the song portions, like the song sings, that it was enjoyable. I liked it, and I think like if it was maybe 2 or 3 films back, I probably would not have enjoyed it based off the voice acting. So there's that. The action, like you said, was typical high fantasy. I think, well, actually not typical for that.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's like if you saw that, they're like, these guys suck. Like when watching a film where the like one dude's killing like 70 or 80 guys, it's like, well, that's, to be honest, that's not really realistic.
Well, there was one scene I really liked where, you know, this guy was the guy who tried to force Frodo to give him the ring. He ended up protecting him, and he got, you know, arrowed by those tribal guys, and it was a cool scene. It was a very slow scene. If it was like, you know, 2017, they would make it more cinematic, but it was like a normal, the way he died, it was played down a bit. It wasn't much fanfare, and he just kept on getting back up, and he kept on getting arrowed, and the whole action of this movie is very stagey because it was the 70s. That's how they kind of did it. And again, they don't have the effects or the money to make it cinematic. So I like the fight scenes, even though they do look a little bit like a stage play, but because they're over animated anyway, aesthetically, it looks pretty brutal. Now, one other thing I want to bring up, and we're not really, even though we've kind of did this, everyone's favorite critic, the nostalgia critic, he actually did a video.
Oh, the guy with the hat?
The guy with the hat and the glasses. That's what it used to be called, thehatandtheglasses.com. He did a good video comparing Bakshi's version to the Peter Jackson version up to the Two Towers, I thought it was a very fair comparison. He gave a lot of props to Bakshi as well. I thought he's very critical guy, and very funny guy. And watching that video, we're really on the same page. Bakshi's version of this Lord of the Rings is very good. I would show this to my nephew before I would show him the movie because he likes animation. He's a kid, that's animation more anyway. And again, Peter Jackson's version I want to call it a family movie. I don't know. It's geared more towards the fan base, and I think this movie is more accessible. I think that's the best way. I think this movie, to get into the franchise, I'm not saying it's a better movie. I'm just saying because it's an animated movie, because it looks cool. I think for kids, I think this is more accessible as a first watch than the first one, than the Peter Jackson movie. I know I'll get shit for even saying it. I can already hear the comments. But for me, I was like, if I watched this first, I would have been a fan of the franchise more than the Peter Jackson one, personally. I was just my only complaint with the movie was, as the movie went on, I felt that there was things missing that I could tell. As they were getting to the Two Towers story, I didn't really understand what's going on. They skipped over things, and according to Wikipedia, he did chop out a lot of things as they were getting to the end, also knowing the problems he had behind the scenes, not being able to finish it anyway. But the way it ends, it stopped in a place that was fine. It was like, okay, I know this isn't going to end, but where it stops now, I actually want to watch what you're going to do. It didn't do some clean cut, rush that I haven't got time to finish it. It felt like it was intentional, part one, and it ended in a part one place. In its own way, it's a kind of a standalone thing, but it does make you want more. And as a whole, if I had to give this movie a rating, I would give it a very, very low solid B, because I do think it's above watchable, especially for the time. Very unique in its design. As you said, voice acting. And oh my God, I nearly forgot. Gollum. Loved him. I mean, Gollum, that character, all iterations, he's cool. And I know the motion cap for him by, I can't remember the guy's name. He became famous, the motion.
Yeah, straight from that role.
Yeah, but the animated Gollum here is just as disturbing, voice acting great. Gollum is always a standout in this franchise. And in this cartoon, there's one scene where he even Chris's Frodo's I believe you, master. And Frodo's looking at him like, you piece of shit.
Yeah, like the look of absolute disgust on his face is something that's hard to sometimes pick up from literary words, but it was shown pretty well here. I am also there with you. I wouldn't put it like super low solid B, just a low solid B. I liked it a lot, keeping in mind that I like fantasy more than you do.
Sure.
I did notice that they were chopping out a lot of the Two Towers towards the end because, like you said, they were trying to make it for a two-parter. So that kind of hurt it a little bit. Like, if I'm not thinking about the source material, it did not hurt the film that much, although it would have helped to probably have thrown in like maybe 2 or 3 more minutes to include a little bit more of what was going on with the Two Towers. But overall, I do like it. I wish he had a part 2. I wish he used his crowdfunding to do a part 2, for example. I think at this point, this is where he's really starting to get a good feel for rotoscoping. Sometimes, like, the humans don't look that great with the rotoscoping, but, like, the monsters, like I was saying, they look pretty good with the rotoscoping. So he was starting to really get in sync with that. Does it hold up to today's standards? I would say, yeah. I think for a younger crowd or with a shorter attention span than, like, I mean, this is still a long movie, don't get me wrong. It's, like, over 2 hours long. But I think it's probably easier to follow for that type of audience versus like like a hardcore fan or something like with the Peter Jackson movies, because they understand like all the politics, all the shit that's going on because they've already read source material. But if you're just jumping into this is a good start if you don't know anything about it. Even if you haven't read The Hobbit, they like do enough concisely and quickly enough, but not unnaturally, that it adds to the story and you know what's going on and where they're going with it. So I do like it a lot. I think so far, this is Bakshi's best and most complete piece. I hope it's not, like, overall, but it's not a bad one if it is. Like, if this is his high mark, he's got a lot more pluses than minuses on this to me than any of his other shit. And a lot of it isn't his fault. Yeah. A lot of it is he wanted a part 2. Well, he got fucked out of it. And you know what? Even if it's just a one film in the middle of a story that's standalone, it's still a good film. I still liked it.
Sure. And I know if in case some of our listeners are going to bring this up, there was an animated movie version of The Hobbit But that wasn't done by Bakshi. That was done by Rankin Bass, that production company that is a lot more kiddie. And even after Bakshi made this movie, they followed up with the
Return of the King.
Return of the King, and again, it was so bad. It was another. If they kept to Bakshi style, maybe, but again, it's not Bakshi. So they did some ultra kiddie. It's so ridiculous. If you watch the Nostalgia Critics review, he brings it up as well for 5 seconds. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa! Don't do it, guys. Don't even bother. So I will tell you what I came away from this movie thinking, and I knew this even before watching this movie. I would enjoy the Lord of the Rings franchise on a whole way more as an animated feature. If this whole universe was either Japanese anime or Western animation, like Dungeons and Dragons, I think I would love that. I would love the franchise a lot more. I don't know why. I just feel like live action, it's just too boring for me. I don't know why. I'm not immersed as much in it. But there's something about seeing it animated, seeing the world animated, and even here, rotoscoping is not the same as animation. I know if I saw this in traditional 2D, maybe CG, but I would prefer traditional 2D, like a Japanese animation style. And there's so many anime fantasy stories. Like I reviewed one here. I can't remember, but there's a pair of them. I'm not going to bring them up in here.
Berserk.
You know what? There you go. Some would argue that, yeah, I would say that's fair. I was going to say Berserk Sarka.
Definitely darker.
Yeah.
I'm there with you. Like, I would love to see the Lord of the Rings animated instead of live action. I think what you're trying to say is like, and I agree, is that with cartoons and hand-drawn animation, especially for our generation, there's like a connection to your imagination. Whereas when you're watching a live action, it's like they're telling you this is how everything's going to look if it was real. But when you're watching it animated, you can make the jump for yourself while you're watching it in the cartoon form. So, which I enjoy a lot. I like having that ability, or that, not the ability, but the choice. I can watch as a cartoon and, hey, this is how it looks, or I wonder what it would look like in real life, because it looks pretty cool in the cartoon.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
You just brought up a fantastic point. I forgot. Do you remember the whole controversy with The Hobbit in the first place?
Controversy? No,
Yeah.
not really.
Oh, you're going to remember because it was world news. Remember, Peter Jackson wasn't filming the movie in traditional shutter speed. He was actually filming it. I think it was, I should know this because I'm a tech guy. He filmed the movie in a faster shutter speed because it looked even more real. I think it was it 24 hertz or something? Basically, it was a massive controversy. He wanted to make it even more real. So, guys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, movies are shot at a certain frame rate where there's a movie type of motion to it. They've been doing this for decades.
Doesn't it normally look a little bit slower than real life?
Yes, exactly. But Peter Jackson, when The Hobbit came out, he's like, you know what? Nope, I'm going to use real life frame speed. And people said, you know what it looked like? It looked like a stage play.
Ooh, that's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah, they said it was too real. It looks fake. You know, it looks so real.
It looks
fake.
so real, it's fake. What a fucking problem to have.
Yeah, guys, if you know what I'm talking about, I'll put a link into this. It was a massive thing and no one could believe it. But then all these critics went to the films, even the fans, and then Peter Jackson's like, wow, I'm trying to, move cinema forward, this new technology. And then he pushed it too far. And then it was crazy. And then, I went on YouTube, I saw a clip, I'm like, yeah, it looks like a behind the scenes. It looks like if you want to ever see the behind the scenes, when they're making the movie, that's what it looked like. That's what the movie actually looked like. And they were like, so it's funny you brought that up when we were talking about live action versus animation, because I don't even like that without that realistic look. So in animation, like you said, I just love it, man. Dungeons and Dragons, Berserk, even, what's the anime that we didn't do? There's an anime that came out a couple years ago that I didn't even get to review. I'll put it on the screen. I can't remember. I'll even talk to Old Boy about it. We might review it because
like anything about it.
Yeah, it was a fan. It was basically another fan. It was another Dungeons and Dragons fantasy. I think it was based off a game. Is it called Rage of the Bahamut? That was it. Rage of the Bahamut. How could I forget? Rage of the Bahamut.
I never even heard of that.
Yeah, it was I liked it. I thought it was just very simple fantasy story. I think it was based off a Japanese tabletop game. I really liked it. It was just a simple fantasy action story, like Lord of the Rings, like Berserk. A bit more whimsical though, although it did get serious at the end. And you know what? We never got to I watched season 1, didn't review it on the channel. We might watch season 2. I might get the young boy to check it out, and it's unlikely. But guys, let us know if you want that in the comments down below. But anyway, we already spoke about the movie, the franchise. This one's gone on long enough. Young boy, Catface Killer, I want to thank you for joining me on this discussion, as always.
Hey, you know, it was actually enjoyable this time, so thanks for having me.
Uh-oh, we're getting back to the Bakshi scripts next. You never know, because like I said, he's continuing the rotoscoping theme. Let's see what he does with the story. And guys, if you're interested in what we're doing here, covering the Ralph Bakshi movies, and some of the feedback has been somewhat positive. I thought I was going to get a lot of hate from the fanboys, but there's been some, there's been some back and forth on Twitter and some emails I got. It's all good, guys. He's a very controversial person in the world of animation, but he's got a very interesting filmography. There's no doubt about that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, guys, again, I'll put the playlist in the top right-hand corner of the YouTube card. And if you listen on the podcast, don't worry. I'll put a link just down in the description. But Catface, it's time for us to get the hell out of here. We'll just leave it at that. And guys, we'll see you on the next recording.
All right, then. Later, guys. And don't forget about candles!